Well, just as the cracks are beginning to show in the European Union, African countries are looking at moving closer together. Leaders attending this week's African Union Summit are looking forward to getting their new Africa-wide passport. Now, the aim is for everyone to have access to such a passport by 2018. That's more than 1 billion people. But is this a passport to success? As our Sukri takes a look.
Africa has some of the harshest trade barriers. To move freight through the continent, up to 1,600 documents can be needed. And half of all Africans need a visa to cross a border. And the only country among the African Union's 54 members that allows free travel for all is the Seychelles. That's why the AU is launching a single African passport. It'll boost the continent's socio-economic development and allow the free flow of people, ideas, goods and services. But with challenges like terrorism, smuggling and illegal immigration, detractors fear the AU's goal of a visa-free continent by 2020 is just a dream. And as has happened in Europe, it could intensify competition for jobs and damage public services. The new passports also represent an offering to a growing cosmopolitan middle class that hopes to take advantage of economic benefits offered by visa-free travel. A common passport is intended to boost international trade within Africa and greatly reduce its dependence on goods from outside. China is Africa's main export market and its largest source of imports. But African countries have individual trade deals with China that don't necessarily benefit the entire continent equally. For AU nations, many of them with a relatively recent colonial past, the dream of a common passport appears to be a shared ideal of Pan-Africanism. The decision to introduce it comes as Britain has decided to leave the European Union. The Leave campaign appealed to voters' economic worries and a sense of national sovereignty, and was tied to anti-immigrant sentiment. The real test for Africa would be to see if its people can overcome those same fears, which have been the cause of conflict and war throughout the continent. Azhar Sukri, TRT World.
Well, for more on this, we're joined by Fidelis Mbah now. He's in Kigali, the Rwandan capital, where the summit is taking place. Have the leaders got their passports yet? And this is a very exciting moment for Africa, Fidelis.
Yeah, well, Matt, the leaders are yet to get their passports because the passport is scheduled to be launched on the 17th or the 18th of July. That's Sunday or Monday when the formal summit will take place. And then some of the leaders who have actually been able to fulfill the obligations needed to be issued these passports will get their copies, and some top officials of the African Union. But for now, it's still just a plan that will be, and it will be officially unveiled before the end of this African Union summit.
But there is hope there that this could really open up the continent for business.
Yes, this is actually something that many people have been expecting, before now. In fact, many people felt that this should have happened after the Schengen Agreement by the European Union, where, so that to increase trade among countries. Like as Sukri mentioned in his report, there are so many trade barriers across Africa. It's so difficult traveling and even doing business from one country to the other. But then there are also concerns that, even if this opens up business, what about the security threat? Because we have cases of terrorism and conflict across various countries across Africa. And when you open up, if there are visa-free travels across the continent, it might actually give rise to some form of, transporting these forms of conflict or terrorism across the borders to other countries that are relatively peaceful at the moment.
Hey, Fidelis, just one last question. The African Union is often criticised for coming up with ideas and not carrying them through. Is this scheme, just very briefly, is this scheme going to take off?
Well, as it stands now, there are no doubts that this will be launched. All logistics are in place. I've spoken to some of the African Union officials here in Kigali for this summit, and they are very confident that come the 17th or the 18th, these passports will be made, public, and then by 2018, everybody will have it. People are hoping that this will be a departure from the past where African Union will say things and actually not implement it to the letter.
OK. Fidelis Mbah, thank you very much. Let's get some analysis now, and Gershon Mosaine is the chairman of South Africa's Forum of Immigration Practitioners, and he joins us from the South African capital, Pretoria. Gershon, thanks for joining us on Money Talks. Let's get straight to the point here. Boosting the economy is the idea. Do you think it will help?
Yes, it will help to boost the economy and free trade between African countries. But that does not outweigh the risk that comes with this African passport and the legislative challenges that will flow from that. Because of, for an example, the immigration regulations and laws in South Africa have to be amended to accommodate this African passport.
It's very interesting, isn't it? Because in terms of security, African countries are at very different levels when it comes to, say, biometric passports.
Yes, that is correct. If you were to know that South Africa has introduced biometrics at OR Tambo International Airport, but now the question is South Africa is not at the same level as Zimbabwe. Now, how is Zimbabwe going to be on the same page with other African countries? I'm just taking Zimbabwe as an example.
Sure.
But there's other countries like Southern Sudan, which is on the brink of civil war. Will they be able to roll out this new passport? And
Sure.
will they be able to deal with the security features of this new passport?
So you're probably thinking that 2018 is incredibly optimistic then. I just want to talk about the young people and jobs, though. The African Union is hoping that by opening up Africa to all these different countries within Africa, it might actually prevent young people looking for a job, risking their lives, trying to cross into Europe. Do you think that might be the case?
It might not necessarily be the case because of Africa is way behind Europe in a sense that if you look in Africa, where would you go to if you are in the Central Africa or you are in Zimbabwe? The first country to go to is South Africa. Everybody will flock to South Africa, not necessarily that people will not want to go to Europe.
Right.
Africa, we don't have too many options. So it might not necessarily solve the problem. It is a noble idea, but it is far too early. Africa is not at the same level as Europe, and African countries are not on the same page.
Right.
Others are still way behind. They don't even have a population register.
Gershon Mosaine from Pretoria, thank you for your analysis.